So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to this policy dialogue on the Brussels terror attacks, lessons learned and challenges ahead for Europe, jointly organized by the EPC in cooperation with the European Foundation for Democracy and the Counter-Extremism Project. My name is Andrea Frontini. I'm a policy analyst at the European Policy Center in the Europe in the World Programme, and I have the pleasure to moderate this afternoon's panel with four outstanding experts and policymakers. We have today Mr. Jorge Bento Silva, Deputy Head of Unit for Crisis Management and Fight Against Terrorism at DG Migration and Home Affairs from the European Commission, Mr. Peter van Oostayen, Independent Analyst on Jihadi Movement, Mr. Alain Wienand, Advocate General at the Belgian Supreme Court and former head of the Belgian State Security Service, and last but certainly not least, Senator Alain Destex, member of the Belgian Parliament. And many thanks to the speakers for taking the time to be with us despite the rather short notice of the invitation. It's much appreciated. I will not dwell too much on the topic of today's discussion, which in my view is very much self-evident, but I'll just stick to maybe a couple of points just to start. I think that after the inevitably emotional reaction that the horrible attacks which struck Brussels on the 22nd of March, there has been a strong need for a more rational and hopefully more strategic reflection on the kind of response that is needed to be given to the threat of terrorism, both here in Belgium and more generally in Europe. I think that in a nutshell, it is quite reasonable to say that these tragic events have stressed further the dangerous evolution of the radicalization phenomena in this country and in Europe more generally, and the manifold consequences that this brings in a number of crucial policy areas, spanning from security to integration, which all need to be coordinated domestically here in Belgium, but also across borders in Europe and at a more international level. And therefore, I think it's crucial for the policy community to discuss and reassess the structures, the policies, the processes to address jihadist radicalization in Belgium and Europe, and also to better anticipate future challenges and what kind of policy responses are needed by everybody. So we will try today to address a number of key questions with our excellent speakers. Among those, what are the main drivers and catalysts of the jihadist threat in Brussels and in Europe? How can concretely policymakers cooperate better and coordinate domestically and across borders to prevent this phenomenon? And what lessons learned can be taken, and what kind of challenges we are all facing. So before we start, just allow me to give the floor briefly to Mrs. Roberta Bonazzi, who's the Executive Director of the European Foundation for Democracy, with whom we are cooperating not only on this single event, but on a much wider project. And I trust that Roberta will give you more information in her welcome remarks.
Andrea, thank you
so much.
Thank you. Sorry, I jumped on your words. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome you all to this second policy briefing on jihadist radicalization. Some of you may remember that the first policy briefing was organized on the 22nd of March, the day of the Brussels attacks. As we were all heading towards the EPC office, news of the attacks were coming through. We had an internal discussion on whether we should go ahead with the briefing or not. Eventually, we decided it was very important that this discussion would take place because the topics remain critical, and what was happening in Brussels that morning was a confirmation that these issues are very close to us. For the past 11 years, the European Foundation for Democracy has worked on the issues relating to radicalization and prevention of radicalization. We've been working and engaging with individuals, politicians, decision makers, but also activists who work with and within communities who are being affected and at the center of the threat of radicalization. Our goal in joining forces with the European Policy Center and the Counter-Extremist Project was to contribute and by bringing together to Brussels as many experts and decision makers, but also people who work with on the ground and are directly exposed to these kind of issues and threats, to bring them together and to favor a constructive exchange of knowledge, to ensure that we don't only act based on fear, but that there is at public level, decision level, a much broader understanding of the phenomenon. This program is based on a series of policy dialogues, 6 policy dialogues that will cover a number of issues ranging from radicalization in schools, prisons, mosques, but also in social media and the media, as well as right-wing extremism, which together with jihadism are just the flip side of the same coin. The program will be concluded in December by the publication of by the presentation of a publication that will collect research and analysis by a number of experts, including many of those who you might have heard speaking during the program, and it will be presented at a public event. I think well, we're very glad that we're here today, and I think most importantly, we give the floor to the experts on this panel. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Roberta, for the micro remarks, and thank you once again also on behalf of the EPC for the excellent cooperation on this project. I will now jump to Mr. Bento Silva. I know, sir, you have a rather tough travel schedule, so I won't take too much time to introduce you. Just to say that, of course, the European Commission is an important player in the comprehensive policy response which is needed to counter radicalization and terrorism. It has had mostly a coordinating support role towards member states, which retain key competencies in these areas. But of course, the situation is also evolving. We have read the statement by the EU Ministers for Justice and Home Affairs following the Brussels attacks, and there are project initiatives coming up. So up to you, sir, to give some details on this and
Thank you.
issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. My apologies first and foremost to the panel and the audience for the fact I will be leaving within 20 minutes. I have to be in Zaventem to catch a flight to Madrid, where the European Parliament is organizing a hearing tomorrow. And given the situation in Zaventem, it's going to be a narrow shave. So my apologies. My colleague, Mr. Javier Castillejos, is a member of our team working on the prevent part of the activities of DG Home. He's a specialist on terrorism financing, but also on the legal framework on terrorism and the proposal we have just made for directive, and generally extremely well aware of what we are doing in the prevent area. He will be able to participate in the debate or answer any questions that you may have after I leave. Very briefly, before I start, a word of public recognition, appreciation, admiration for our Belgian colleagues. Obviously, condolences to my fellow Bruxellois. I've been here for 30 years. I have 2 kids born here, so I'm as much of a Bruxellois as anyone is. But besides the condolences, a very heartfelt word, and is not just a personal word, but one from my institution, regarding the exceptional work that Belgium security services, Sûreté, Belgium Federal Police, and other security practitioners have been conducting. I know that this is not exactly the image that the public has, and that is exactly why it should be stated in a very loud and clear way. Colleagues are working 16 hours a day in extraordinary conditions, many at risk of their own lives. They are doing it with an exceptional commitment and a remarkable willingness to live up to the confidence of the public, the expectations of the state authority, and also to do so in close cooperation with each other. So I think that for those of us who interact with our Belgian colleagues on a daily basis. It's only fair to start by saying that. What are we doing in response? And actually, this should be my presentation should perhaps be the end of the series. It's just the way things happened. Basically, what we are doing is more, faster, and deeper what we were going to be doing anyway. With some nuances, I will come back to those, but I think that it is important as well to state that we have not woken up to this problem on the 22nd of March or in November after the Paris attacks. We have been following the terrorism situation for many years. The first documents from the European Commission on radicalization date back to 2005. I had the honor of holding the pen on some of this. It will not be the terrorists dictating the agenda of the European Union, and we are basically, unfortunately, we have been comforted in our expectations rather than surprised by what has been happening. The fact that it happened here, that it is. Yes, we were not expecting it at that moment on that day. In that fashion, yes, the modus operandi, but other speakers, as notably Mr. Venans, are much better aware. But I mean, the type of activity and the fact that this type of activities was most likely to happen in Europe is something that is easily testified also by the levels of alerts in different countries, including in Belgium. So we were not surprised. Unfortunately, we were expecting it. It happened. And the policies that have been established by member states and by the European Union, by and large, have been vindicated. What has been done in the last year, I will take you very briefly in perhaps in 2 minutes through a list. I'll be happy to come back to any specific point of the main actions that have been completed by European institutions over the last year. The establishment of the European Counterterrorism Center in Europol, a major achievement that once again counters the general perception in public opinion that we can't get our act together, that not only member states cannot share, but the different types of information that are required to fight terrorism cannot come together. Well, the European Counterterrorism Center in Europol is a place where financial intelligence units information, expertise on internet radicalization, where removal of internet, I will come back to that, of criminal material present in the internet is being acted upon on a daily basis with an extremely high success rate. 91% of referrals made by Europol Counterterrorism Center to private companies are acted upon very quickly and material removed from the internet. So this center, I will not dwell on this, it's a major achievement of the European Union. The establishment of renewed ways of improving checks on borders in advance of the modification of the Schengen Code, with establishment of common risk indicators for the screening of people entering Europe, which can be foreign fighters, on the basis of criteria that are not based on ethnic profiling, are based on objective data related to the travel patterns, related to the documents held, and which are therefore both reinforcing the control of security at European borders and fully compatible with fundamental rights, is, I think, a very important achievement. The establishment of the EU Internet Referral Unit in Europol that I briefly mentioned. The EU Internet Forum, I will come back to that more in detail because it's one of the most interesting and exciting developments that is taking place right now. The hate speech initiative launched in 2015, which is exactly not focusing on Islamist terrorism-related hate speech, but on all forms of hate speech, including Islamophobic ones that feed the narrative of Daesh and affiliated groups. the establishment of the Center of Excellence of the Radicalization Awareness Network. I will come back to that. Of course, it's worth taking 2 or 3 minutes. A reinforced cooperation between financial intelligence units with a strengthened platform embedded in Europol. Javier can develop on that if you find interest in it. The Commission implementing regulation on common firearms, the activation standards of 18 November 2015, cooperation with numerous countries in our neighborhood, with reinforced political dialogues with Tunisia, Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, which are very new ways of doing business with third countries, in which the European Union goes to Tunis together with CEPOL, with Europol, with Frontex, with the Radicalization Awareness Network. So we don't go there. It's not EAS, it's EAS, the Commission, the Presidency, the Council, but also the different assets that we have of expertise, including practitioners working on radicalization, that are brought into direct contact with the authorities of the third countries. And out of these reinforced political dialogues, managed of course under the lead of Mogherini and the EAS, we establish action plans, roadmaps with concrete actions, which are managed, many of them in international cooperation with partners, member states partners, but also international organizations, UN bodies, and others, depending on who has what to bring to specific needs of, let's say, Lebanon was the latest such dialogue a few days ago. If I go on, we have the action plan on terrorism financing that was adopted and on which colleagues are working day and night to develop the legislative proposals to implement this action plan, the action plan on firearms and explosives, the establishment of guidance material on soft target protection, including specific documents that have been elaborated with Airpol, the group of airport police authorities of different member states. This unfortunately was only translated into 28 languages days before the attack in Zaventem. It is being, as we speak, distributed to airport security authorities across Europe, and it will be the object very likely in the coming days of additional material that incorporates lessons learned from the Zaventem attacks into best practices on the soft target part of an airport, because we have seen in Zaventem, but we had seen it in Burgas, in other cases, even in Madrid, that terrorists, once we are very effective in protecting the air side, of course they move to the land side, which is much more difficult because it's basically a public space like any other. So I will not take you through, I mean, I've mentioned half of the list of what we have been doing over the last year, and each of this, in each of these categories, you'll find here 25 million euros, their directive, their political initiative of great significance. Now, specifically on radicalization, as I said, Europe has introduced, I mean, we started working on this in 2004, 2005. Why? At the time, the global paradigm on fighting terrorism was the American paradigm. It was the war on terror. We were there alongside the Americans after what they had gone through in 9/11. We were fully solidary, but we obviously had followed American leadership in counterterrorism in the early years after 9/11. But when Madrid happened, and the issue was, how is Europe going to respond? It became absolutely apparent that a response that would be simply copying the American logic on counterterrorism, the war on terror, a logic that was based on defense concepts and essentially on the homeland security concept, a concept of protection against foreign threats. It would be a self-defeating option for Europe. So we needed to try and invent as well as we could a European paradigm. This wasn't easy, but the prevention of radicalization, the PREVENT stream, that first appeared in actually commissioned documents in 2004. In October 2004, there was a communication on the prevention, protection, response to terrorist attacks, 698 of 2004, for those who take interest in those things. This logic that fight against terrorism in Europe is not what the value added that Europe has to bring is not so much on the law enforcement, intelligence, judicial side, where we can, in some regards, contribute by creating a level playing field, establishing standards, creating legal norms. When the framework decision on terrorism was adopted, there was only 6 member states that had the crime of terrorism in their legal order. So the role of Europe is not marginal as a support element in the fight against terrorism, in empowering the judiciary, law enforcement and others to have the means in terms of obtaining, exchanging evidence and many more. But where Europe really could, that is what our political authorities at the time felt, where we could really bring some added value, was in the activities that were not really member states' core responsibility. So the protection of critical infrastructures, because many of those are international or have international effects. If the port of Rotterdam should be denied by a terrorist attack, or 30% of it, the solution for the problem could not be found in the Netherlands. It would involve Antwerp, it would involve Kiel, it would involve other port facilities in other member states. So basically the European Union focused to a large extent in those areas of EU competence, transport, energy, others, where we had to either mainstream security or it would be established at prohibitive costs if it was left to member states to address in those areas. But what we added that was not obvious to that cocktail of mainstreaming security concerns in the different types of activities of the EU was certainly radicalization. So very briefly, most of you will know that this story has been going on now for, 12 years. The first stages was basically trying to find out how much we knew and how ignorant we were about the phenomena, engaging with scientists, with academics, with universities, to try and understand the knowns, the unknowns, and the known unknowns, let's say, of the radicalization problem. This was the first work started in 2005. We gradually moved up in terms of gathering experience that was developing in all sorts of communities in member states. We gradually understood that our weakness was our strength, as normally that is the case in life, and that if what terrorists attack is society itself, that is what they are trying to affect, obviously. The ultimate target of terrorism is each citizen in their soul. But the beauty of democracy is that exactly the same mechanism leads us to the fact that each citizen is also the ultimate wall to which terrorism is confronted. And the experience that we have made with the radicalization activities in Europe led us to the obvious conclusion that it is the practitioners that can find a solution, that the European Union can help states, to help local authorities, to help regional authorities, to empower those in the front line of radicalization, be them teachers, probation officers, social assistants, prison guards, the people working in the internet on a daily way. These are the people that are confronted to the problem. It is in the family that you first spot the development of radicalization. That is the first place where you can act upon it. And so basically what we have been working on, and this remains the philosophy, and I will stop in 2 minutes, is very much on the one hand to empower the frontline actors, and the Radicalization Awareness Network is today recognized as a global standard-setting endeavor. We have more than 2,000 entities spread across practically every member state, working together in 9 transnational groups of experts which deal with issues as different as how you reintegrate, you rehumanize a convict that has gone to the utter extremes of dehumanization by bringing sports in the equation and by bringing this person to box his way into the acknowledge of the existence of rules, and the other one as a human on the other side of a pair of gloves. It's obviously a very anecdotal example, but you have people focusing on that sort of issue, how you grab someone from utter horror, from the other side of humanity, and you bring this person back to the capacity of entering a process of intellectual readmission into the notion of the basics of mankind. And at the other end, we are dealing with doctors who are psychologists, who are dealing with people who come back from Syria, are in post-traumatic stress. Some of them have learned there that actually what they wanted to go and do was not at all what they ended up doing, and they are totally ready to reintegrate our societies, and they should do so if they have not committed crimes. But some of them are potential risks for society on a daily basis. And we have doctors, we have empowered them as well to discuss with each other how in ethical terms you deal with this situation. How do you preserve the doctor-patient relationship at the same time that you exercise your duty to contribute to public security. So the areas of activity of the Radicalization Awareness Network are very broad. 80% of what they do is actually with local authorities, providing support at city level, at regional council level, and to other civil society groups in different countries. That remains the core of our investment. 25 million euros have gone to the establishment of the Center of Excellence of the Radicalization Awareness Network, which is now able to not only allow and support the development of expertise, exchange of expertise between practitioners, but increasingly the transfer of this expertise to policymakers. But of course there are many other areas on which we are investing. They are supplementary to this, and I will refer only two before finishing. The first one I briefly touch upon. It's the Internet Referral Unit in Europol, which is part of the Counterterrorism Center, which is a body that, on the basis of own information supplied by member states and potentially in the future by citizens, is able to detect content in the Internet which violates the law and the contractual standards of Internet service providers, and alerts Internet service providers in real time about the existence of material that should be withdrawn, with a very high success rate. This entered in operation months ago, and we are now having hundreds of referrals per day with a success rate of 91%. The most exciting adventure right now underway, and I will stop there, is the Internet Forum. It was an initiative taken by Commissioner Avramopoulos last year. There were first meetings between the ministers, the Justice Affairs, Home Affairs ministers of the EU, and leaders of the Internet industry. We have moved, I mean, it was a very, as you can imagine, after Snowden, the cooperation between states and Internet service providers is not the easiest thing in the world. And you have in the private sector people that at the same time want to live up to their corporate responsibilities, but are quite wary of engaging with law enforcement and with states in terms of the public image of protection of data of their customers and so on. But we have gone from a process of political engagement to now a process of very hands-on cooperation. Meeting took place, and this is perhaps worth pointing out. The EU organized a workshop in California last week. So we went there with CEPOL, with Europol, with the European majors in the Internet, and we engaged with the American companies, not only the biggest ones, Facebooks and so on, and the Microsofts of this world, but with companies in the US which are very important globally in terms of dissemination of terrorist material because of the First Amendment, of course. We went there to express our concerns, to raise their awareness, and to introduce them to what we can offer, including the referral unit, to our concepts. And what is coming out of there is a very interesting degree of shared understanding about all sorts of tools that could be deployed, including a common database to be held by the industry globally of radicalizing material in the internet that once withdrawn will not be uploaded elsewhere because it has been identified as unacceptable. This is something that is being worked on by the industry itself with our support and vigorous commitment, but at the other end a very resolute interest on the part of the industry to cooperate with public powers in empowering these significant voices out there that have counter-narratives and messages to send to counter the terrorist material. So this is something that Europe has been trying to stimulate, but it's extremely exciting that we now could have on the part of the global internet industry an active support with money behind the goodwill to actually try and create conducts for these frontliners in civil society that have something to say about their own experiences with radicalization in their families and communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Silva, for this rather comprehensive and rather encouraging explanation of what the European Commission and EU bodies are doing at the moment, in a way also anticipating some of the threats that we've witnessed recently. And thank you also for zooming a bit into some of the technicalities, and we welcome also your colleague to take maybe some questions in the Q&A session. But thank you very much also on behalf of the public to be with us. Thank you. So I think it's now time to take, so to say, maybe a step back in our discussion and look really at the radicalization phenomenon in Belgium more closely. And we have the privilege of having with us Mr. Van Oosteyen, who's a renowned analyst and commentator on radicalization phenomena in Belgium and beyond. I think that if my data are correct, around 270 foreign fighters from Belgium have joined or have been involved in joining terrorist organizations.
Just
a bit more than that.
100 more.
Okay, there's 100 more, then it's even more worrisome than what I had feared. But I think data.
Say 150 more, but
Okay. Data vary a bit based on sources, but certainly I think Belgium is perhaps the European country which has the highest number of foreign fighters per capita. I think that's little controversy on
From
that.
Western Europe.
From Western Europe, sure, yes, if you take out the Balkans. We have also seen, how well developed and also widely connected the terrorist network in Belgium has been. We are now, sure about the connection between the Brussels and the Paris attacks, which occurred several weeks ago. We can also see a very direct link between what is happening in Europe in terms of terrorist threats and organizations like ISIS being active in the Middle East. And I think perhaps from a wider perspective, the issue of radicalization in Belgium also poses the question of the kind of historic root causes of this phenomenon and the kind of both societal and security challenges that this poses for policymakers, but also for common citizens in this country. So I would ask Mr. Van Oosteyen to share some of his expertise on us and shed some light on these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frontini. Basically, I didn't prepare anything. Normally, I just improvise. So if anybody's got a question in between, please do ask.
Thank you.
I've been working on Belgian foreign fighters ever since late 2012. I started working on my database project together with Belgian newspaper journalist Guy van Vleerden. And we've been updating it about monthly in the past few years. My very first source material came from the ICSR report that was published late 2012, authored by Aaron Zellin, the founder of jihadology.net, and one of the finest analysts on international jihadism. Basically, I just asked Aaron for his sources on the Belgian fighters, and he sent me an Excel file with about 20 entries. That was it. We had no idea that we had already passed the bridge of over 100. At that time, late 2012, our government was kind of in denial, in my opinion, that there was such a thing as a foreign fighter problem here in Belgium. I think that a lot of people had the idea that basically if we let them leave, problem would solve itself. Well, actually, the problem only got bigger. It didn't took me long before I was at a certain point. I reached a number of 385 entries in the database. Right now, to just give you an example, we reached 589. And of course, that's a high-end estimate. It could well be that we have double mentions in the database because we do have a lot of anonymous entries as well. When I was reaching 385, the former government kept telling me on every occasion that was possible that I was overacting and that I was incorrect. Well, basically, after the elections, a few weeks after the new government, they raised the number of Belgian foreign fighters in Syria and Iraq to exactly 385. Not sure if that was a coincidence, actually. Part of the problem started with Sharia for Belgium. Sharia for Belgium, we looked at them basically, we thought about them as being a bunch of clowns. We were seeing them preaching on the streets in Antwerp. They tried to invade my hometown of Mechelen. They preached in Vilvoorde. They preached here in Brussels. They were very publicly open about what they wanted. They were inspired by the groups, for example, UK for Islam, led by Anjam Chowdhury. But even Belkacem was the leader of Sharia for Belgium, was supported by Sheikh al-Maqdisi, who sent him a letter of support back in the old days of Sharia for Belgium. Sharia for Belgium was very open about its goal. It wanted to introduce Sharia law here in Belgium. Basically, Belkacem was locked up after multiple incidents regarding not only hate speech, but also enticing to violence and go on. So the man was locked away. And then suddenly, on the 7th of October 2012, Sharia for Belgium disbanded itself. A group with over at least 150 members suddenly stopped its activities. It is in the months before October 2012, in the summer basically, that the first Sharia for Belgium members traveled to Syria. One of the first to leave was Hussein al-Wasaki, a guy who got killed back in 2013. Hussein al-Wasaki, it's a rather epic story. I've been told this by a Dutch Jabhat al-Nusra fighter. I have no idea in how much this is a eulogy or this is correct, but it is said that Hussein traveled to Syria all by himself. He roamed the border for several weeks and then suddenly saw the black flag of jihad at the border point of Bab el-Hawa between Turkey and Syria. He crossed the border, talked to some Syrian guys he encountered, and he said he wanted to join the Mujahideen. My source says that Hussein was then dropped off at a bunch of smoking and drinking FSA members, and Hussein went rather berserk, and he said, no, I want to join the Mujahideen. In the end, he ended up in the group of Abu Atir al-Absi. Yesterday, again, Abu Atir al-Absi was named in a new publication of Dabiq. The man has been killed in a US airstrike on the 3rd of March this year, so just over a month ago. This man was incredibly important in building the Islamic State in Iraq and Asham, as it was known before, ISIS. It is known that Haji Bakr and even Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi himself went to Syria, went over to speak with 3 people, Abu Amr al-Absi, Abu Atir, Umar al-Shishani, the military leader of the Islamic State, the man with the big red beard, and one rather anonymous guy who is known as Abu Ubaidah al-Maghribi. But it is known that these 3 people, they actually formed the backbone of the Islamic State in Syria. It is because they gave bay'ah to Baghdadi that the Islamic State was able to gain such fast success in Syria. In the meantime, Hussein al-Wasaqi had been able to draw in over 200 Belgians, French, British, and Dutch fighters to the group of al-Absi. Basically, they didn't know that al-Absi had given his bay'ah to Baghdadi. And when they found out later, because they found out about the letter published by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, general leader of Al-Qaeda, letter was published, I think it was March 2013, where he clearly stated that the Islamic State had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda Central, and that Jabhat al-Nusra was the only group that represented Al-Qaeda. They found out about the letter, and then there was some kind of a dispute with al-Absi, and basically what happened, the group broke up in about 80% of them joined with al-Absi and joined ISIS, and the other 20% remained loyal to the Al-Qaeda philosophy. They joined Jabhat al-Nusra, and some of them, and amongst which a lot of Dutch members of Jabhat al-Nusra, I'm still in contact with. It's always a bit strange to talk to an Al-Qaeda jihadi, but I've been doing this for a few years right now, so I can't even get surprised anymore about what these guys try to tell me. Lately, one tried to convert me, for example. So in the end, we can see that about 70 members of Sharia for Belgium, in the end, traveled to Syria. No, sorry, 80, excuse me. 80 exactly at this point. At one point, have been involved in the war in Syria or Iraq. The majority of these, all of them, joined the Islamic State. If I remember correctly, it was Mr. Wienans who, in the end, he said that Sharia for Belgium worked as a catalyst, if I'm not mistaken. That Sharia for Belgium was the group that enticed more people in Belgium to join the war in Syria and Iraq. Basically, what was going on, the Sharia for Belgium members had their networks, their family, relatives, friends, who they asked to join the war in Syria. So these guys, the second group, left out of peer pressure. And you see the third group, those would be the guys who joined the Islamic State after June 29, 2014, when the Caliphate was founded by al-Adnani. But then we have a very other network, a more, as it has pointed out, to be a very more dangerous one, the network, the cell around Khalid Zarqani. In about 10 minutes, his hearing will start here somewhere in Brussels. Too bad I'm not able to be there, because that would be interesting. It's his higher appeal. From the Zerkani network, we know that at this point, at least 59 members of that cell have been involved in the Islamic State. Some of them, like for example the most known Abdelhamid Abaoud, he also joined Majlis Shurat al-Mujahideen, the group of Al-Absi, which I mentioned before, the group in which Hussein al-Wasaki was military leader of the Muhajirin brigade. If we look at the cell Zerkani, and the difference between the cell Zerkani and Sharia for Belgium, it's huge. Whereas in the very first days, I saw Sharia for Belgium indeed as being a catalyst, and some of the members had been involved in killings and go on and criminal activities in Syria. But if we look at them right now, I would compare Sharia for Belgium with the Boy Scouts, basically. If you look at the Zerkani cell, these are the hardened criminals. If you look at, for example, the judicial past of people like the Bakraoui brothers, one of them, he robbed a cashier here in Brussels, then left with a car, opened fire with a Kalashnikov in a high-speed pursuit of broad daylight here in the city of Brussels. The mayor of Brussels at that time called it a fait divers. Don't know how to... Basically, both of the Bakraoui brothers were hardened criminals. If we look at, for example, Abdelhamid Abaoud and Salah Abdeslam, also criminals. They had a criminal past together. If we look at another remarkable thing in the whole chain of events that led eventually to the attacks on the 22nd of March here in Brussels. If we look at, for example, the attack on the Jewish museum here in Brussels, we do know that Mehdi Nemmouche had a phone call of at least 26 minutes with nobody else than Abdelhamid Abaoud. The guy who tried to, the foiled attacks in Verviers, the network that was taken down by the security forces. Links with Abaoud. The guy who tried to open fire on the high-speed train between Amsterdam and Paris. He knew Abaoud in person. All the guys involved in the Paris attacks all knew Abaoud in person. Some of them came from the Zerkani network straight away. If we look at everybody who's been involved in all this chain of events, there's one linking pin, and that would be Abaoud, all over again. And Abaoud himself, in my idea, had a very important role, being responsible for the military training of the recruits of not only the Zerkani network, but also other people who joined that particular network in Syria from other nations, like, for example, Reda Kriket, like the guy from Sweden, whose name elopes me at the moment. But we do see that it was a rather important network. And if we look back just a bit in the history of the Islamic State, we had at some point we had a brigade in the ranks of the Islamic State that was called Katibat al-Batar al-Libi, the Libyan brigade of the Islamic State. Well, Abaoud and a lot of these Zerkani recruits and of his personal friends, they ended up fighting in the ranks of Katibat al-Batar al-Libi. Katibat al-Batar al-Libi, by some analysts, it has been called the tip of the spear, one of the most specialized fighting units within the ranks of the Islamic State. If you take all these elements together, put them together on a very big pile, you've got like an amazing puzzle. It's like not all the pieces are there yet. But if you try to puzzle it together, you can reach some mind-numbing results, in my idea. And that would also mean that I do believe that even though Abrini and Abdeslam have been arrested right now, and all the other ones are either that or arrested as well, I am convinced that this isn't over yet. The network is still bigger than we ever suspected. The possibility that more recruits of Serkani still roam the streets, I'm not talking only Syria, Iraq, but I'm also talking Brussels, is real. We do know that the possible outreach of the Serkani network might include 50 to at least 70 more people. So, in concluding remark, a lot of things happened in just a few months' time. I remember when I was sitting here in November after the attacks in Paris, I concluded with the question is not if or when it is going to happen, but where. Well, my question got answered. Again, now I do believe that the threat for Belgium and Europe isn't over yet. And I'm very curious about the next pieces of the puzzle that will fall in the next few days, weeks, and months to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. van Ostaaien, for your very interesting analysis. It seems indeed a very complex puzzle, one which is complicating day by day, month by month. We're very grateful for you for sharing your analysis with us. I now move to our next speaker, Mr. Nan Wijnands. Mr. Wijnands has a long-standing experience in the Belgian Security Services now, as I said, Advocate General at the Belgian Supreme Court, which makes him, in a way, an ideal candidate to look at some of the security and legal complexities of the responses needed to counter the challenges posed by the Brussels attacks and other threats across Europe. So, Mr. Wijnands, if I may, what's your assessment of the Brussels terror attacks and what responses are needed in your view? Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. Well, before starting a brief expose, I would like to underline the fact that I left as Administrator General of the Sûreté on March 2014. So yeah, I'm not in classified information anymore since that time. Also, despite of my function in the judicial, I do not have access to judicial inquiries in which the rule of secrecy of the investigation is very important. So I will not be able to go in any operational or judicial detail. And even if I could, this doesn't seem the forum to discuss, I think, operational and very sensitive information. So I will deliver you some keynotes, some general remarks that are based on my experience, 8 years experience as the head of the Belgium Intelligence Service. Now, first item is what happened on March 22 in Brussels, an unexpected shock. It, of course, is a shock, an enormous shock for Belgium. We joined on that day the already long list of other cities that saw same events happen to them, and it's clear that nothing will ever be the same, and that there will be a before and an after 22 of March. It seems also clear to me, and I join Mr. van Ostaaien in what he just said, it seems clear to me that the Belgians and Belgium will have to live for a rather long period, as other European cities do, with the idea of a terrorist attack being possible, and I should say even probable. Now, if it was a shock, was it an unexpected one? I don't think so. It's true that in the past, Belgium, although we have known at some occasions and we have been confronted with terrorist attacks on our soil, in the 70s and 80s, a number of attacks in relation to the Israel and Palestine question. In the 80s, you had the CCC bombing campaigns, extreme left. I'm ruling out what is called in French les tueurs fous du Brabant Wallon, because that, in my opinion, is or were not terrorist attacks. But on the whole, Belgium was relatively spared, and we were essentially a logistical hub, a place where eventually organization of attacks that took place elsewhere could be organized, but we were spared from attacks in Belgium itself. The Sûreté in the 80s and 90s dismantled with the police several networks, the GIA, the MELUC network, the GICM and others. In my opinion, this phase has definitely been changed after the May 2014 attack in the Jewish Museum by Mehdi Nemmouche. After that, you have Paris in January 2015, Verviers in January 2015, the attempt to kill people on the Thalys, and Paris again in November 2015. So everybody in security, intelligence and police services felt that the pressure was mounting and that an attack on Belgian soil was imminent. And the question was not, and indeed, as Mr. Van Oosteyen said, the question was not if an attack should take place in Belgium, but where it should take place and when. Now, second question, is it so exceptional that Belgium should be targeted? Here too, I do not think so. I recall having given a lecture at the High Institute for Defense in Brussels, I think in 2010, where I clearly stated that there was no objective reason why Belgium should be spared of terrorist attacks in the future. We are the capital of Europe. We hold the seats of NATO and of European institutions. The European organizations, Europe is speaking out or trying to speak out on the level of security as one voice. You have the External Action Service, so seen from outside, Europe and Belgium in Europe is a solid bloc. It gives the idea, the image, and I think that in the radical jihadi movements it's perceived as such, that Europe is speaking with one voice, a unified front, in which there is lesser and lesser distinctions made between the different countries of Europe. I don't think it's by pure coincidence that, for instance, the metro station that was targeted is Maalbeek, and I think that I've read somewhere that if it was Maalbeek, it was in fact a mistake by the two people, because the station they wanted to target was Schuman, the most European metro station here in Belgium. Add to all this that Belgium is actively participating in a lot of military conflicts. It's clear, and it has been indicated, I think, by IS, that a lot of the terrorist attacks are revenge for and against the countries who are taking place in military action. And last but not least, I think we are seeing a global polarization where you have two blocs, or what is perceived as two blocs, us, the Muslims, against them, the Western society, without any distinction made between it. Now, could what happened be foreseen? Well, an attack as the attack of March 22 can never be foreseen, but there were, I think, in the past some signs of increasing radicalization that should maybe have been taken a bit more seriously at the time. Mr. Van Oosteyen already pointed it out. The Sûreté was the first to attract the attention on the Sharia for Belgium movement that played in the early days of the Syrian crisis a role as indeed catalyst for the exciting of people, enticing of people going to Syria, and giving the logistical support for them to reach Syria. When I told that to the Belgian authorities, the response was that I was probably overacting, that we were facing long-bearded clowns in white gowns, that they were not very dangerous. Well, I think even if there are networks, and the Zarqani network or the Zarqani as a recruiter is of course much more dangerous, but even if there are more dangerous groups and networks than Savio for Belgium, they certainly were not, in my opinion, clowns. The Sûreté also draw the attention on what we called, and I remember having given an interview to Lviv, I think, what we call the biggest threat for Western democracy, the radical and extreme Salafism, the building of a parallel society within the Western society, with own rules, own justice, own medicines, own police, opposed to everything that is not in line with the most traditional and radical Islam, and something that ends up in a dual society, a Western one, and inside that society another one that rejects everything that is a Western value. And with another danger therein, that is another polarization, the fact that this situation can be recuperated by, for instance, extreme right. And I give you an example. When I think a few days ago or last week there was a silent march organized before the books, you saw at a certain moment extreme right hooligans who came on the place and who tried to influence what was happening there. So that's another problem of polarization. Salafism, extreme Salafism, radical Salafism, and I totally agree, it's the work of a minority of Muslims. But it's an active minority and it's a dangerous minority. And the problem is that the majority of Muslims who do not agree with what this active and dangerous minority is saying is not heard or is not willing to express itself. And I think that one of the solutions, if solutions there are, but one of the paths that needs to be walked will be to involve the majority of the Muslim community that condemns the actions taken by a dangerous but active minority. And then there were, I think, mistakes made on the political and cultural level out of a, in my opinion, misconceived idea that one would be an Islamophobe when one is countering extreme and radical Salafism. And due to that point of view, things were not taken as serious, I think, as they should have been taken. And in my opinion, it is not being an Islamophobe when one opposes actions, behaviors that are aiming to destroy, to annihilate, to the fundamental values of a democratic society. And I think, for instance, of equality between man and wife, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. So I really think that this attitude, this political attitude, this cultural attitude has played a role in not taking seriously the problem. Now, to be successful in the struggle against radicalization and in the failing of terrorism, you need, and I speak now only from a security point of view, because I think it's very evident that radicalization is not only and even not primarily a question of security and intelligence services. It has to do with education, with integration, with access to job markets, with access to decent housing, etc., etc. But on the level of intelligence services, what we need is what are the triggers for radical behavior. Why is it so that Belgium per capita has the most important number of young people? Because the portrait of the Syrian fighters is always a bit the same, very young, between 18 and 25, a bit not at their place in the Belgian society, mostly totally not with a religious past, very often with a criminal pedigree. But the question is, why is Syria so attractive to these people? You have, of course, the fact that, because it's not the first time that Belgium intelligence has been confronted with fighters leaving on zone. We have had the same in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Chechnya. For those who don't know it, but I'm sure that you know it, Belgium has the first female terrorist who blew herself up in Iraq, Muriel de Gauque. So we already had seen the phenomenon of fighters on zone, but not on the level with Syria. So one of the answers will have to be, what is the trigger? What is so attractive for young people to go to Syria? And it's surely not only the fact that it's very easy, much more easy to go to Syria than it was before to go to Afghanistan or to Pakistan. It's an element, of course. You can leave from Zaventem, you can leave from the Netherlands or from Germany. You can go by car if you want. You go to Turkey and you are practically immediately where you need to be. What do we need as an intelligence service? Well, you need, and it seems simple to say that, but it's you need people, you need money, you need tools, you need human sources, you need people who can try to enter in radical environments, who can enter in mosques to see if there are radical preachers that are held. So you need, and I've said this very, very often, the work of intelligence services is a work on the mid and the long term. We do not act on the short term. Well, it can happen that we act on the short term, but the work of an intelligence service is in the mid and the long term. So I urged, and I still urge, politicians to have a security and intelligence policy that goes along with working in the long and the mid-term and not reacting ad hoc on occasions, on dramas like we have seen today. I think that the actual government has seen the light, if I may express myself in that way. I don't recall how many times I addressed letters to the Belgian authorities to underline that security has a price and that one must be willing to pay that price. And even if this government has changed its policy, I would like to say that until the foiled Verviers attacks, this government also had in mind of downsizing the budget of the security services. So what I do hope is that it will not be an ad hoc reaction. Would there not be any more attack during 5 or 10 years, I would be sure that within a few years we would be again on the same road of downsizing budget means for an intelligence service. Now, being rather pessimistic in this point of view, I don't think that there will not be attacks anymore in 5 or 10 years. Now, what happened is that a failure of security, intelligence and police services. Well, let me be clear. Every time a terrorist attack is not avoided, every time a plot is not foiled, it is, of course, a failure. But let me be clear on another point. No intelligence service, no security service, no police service in the entire world can give you the assurance that this could not happen in their country. And what I would like to make very clear is that the zero risk option does not exist in terrorism. And it is the fate of intelligence services that they can, for evident and obvious reasons, that they cannot brag and comment on their successes. Everybody who works or has worked in an intelligence service knows this and accepts this. On the other hand, when an event as Brussels, Paris, London, Madrid, Casablanca occurs, the mistake, the failure is smeared out in the press, largely commented, and let me add, mostly largely commented by people who do not know how secret services work and who have no clue how an intelligence services has to go on with such events. But that also is a fate of an intelligence service. In January 2015, the Belgian services successfully foiled a terrorist attack in Verviers in close cooperation between intelligence and police and in close cooperation between Belgium and French police and intelligence officers. They were at that moment depicted as heroes, extremely professional, accurate, well-informed, and working in perfect combination with other services. After the Paris attacks in November 2015, we went from hero to zero. We were incompetent, we were amateurs, we were the weakest link in the chain of anti-terrorism, etc., etc. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of words on that Belgium bashing. Maybe, and certainly, mistakes have been made. But these mistakes have been made in other countries by other services who have much more capacities than the Belgian ones. And I think that everybody is seeing that in the last few weeks, the intelligence and security services are doing a formidable work. We are dismantling a network, although I agree that probably in this network there will be other people who are still around, and on the other hand that there are other sleeping cells active for the moment in Brussels, and, which is not something unimportant, we take them alive sometimes. So we can try to debrief them and to see what is the organization of the networks and what, if they are willing to speak, is the plan. Nevertheless, things can, of course, be done better. I recently viewed the program on BBC by Peter Taylor, a program in which I participated, on IS in Europe. Well, it seems obvious there that people involved in the Paris and in the Brussels attacks were able to freely travel in and around Europe without being detected, without being intercepted, even if they were on the list of suspicious people. I agree that information handed over from Turkey to the Netherlands did not reach in due time the Belgian authorities. And I also agree that some information on Salah Abdeslam did not reach the French authorities just after the attacks, and allowed Salah Abdeslam to pass through several police controls without being noticed. Now the question is, if that information would have reached him, because it was information that he had some terrorist sympathies, would that have been enough to link Mr. Salah Abdeslam at that moment to the attacks in Paris? I don't know. Now, one, and I've already often said this, one of the forces of IS, one of the many forces of IS, is that they have the disposition of what I call an army of jihadi fighters, mostly with double nationality, speaking the language of the country they are targeting, in possession of identification documents of that country, and who can, within the Schengen zone, freely travel without being bothered. Now, the question is, does that mean that we need to get rid of the Schengen zone? And you can enlarge the debate. What are we as Western democracies willing to give up in the fight against terror of the values and the realizations Europe has given us? Schengen is for Europe a very important instrument. I have seen after the Paris attacks and the Brussels attacks that some politicians, and if I recall, ex-President Sarkozy was one of them, saying that Schengen is that finished. I don't know, but is that what we want? The government in Belgium and in France has announced a lot of measures to be taken, for instance, and some of those measures were announced as being already realized without seeing what the problems would be. I'll give a small example. The house searches in Belgium are not possible in general after 9 o'clock in the evening and before 5 o'clock in the morning. One of the measures announced by the government was that one was going to change that, and that so certainly in terrorist crimes, house searches should be possible at any time. One of the big problems is that one seems to have forgotten that the house searches are based on an article of the Belgian Constitution. So if you want to change those rules, you will have to change Article 15 of the Belgian Constitution. Other example, France did the same, taking back the Belgium of French nationality of people involved in terrorist attacks. Now, I really don't think that a jihadi fighter who is in Syria, who has been formed military, who has been taught to kill, to make bombs, and who has been targeted, who has been charged to commit an attack here in Belgium or in France, that his biggest worry will be that if he succeeds and if he is not killed, one would take away his Belgian nationality. I don't think that that is something that will be of nature of withholding him to do so. Another point, and maybe in this forum this is a bit delicate, but I have said it already a few times to journalists. After the attacks in Paris and in Brussels, you have heard a lot of European politicians pleading for the European CIA or FBI. Personally, and I'm not the only one, I'm totally opposed to this idea. First of all, and I find that a bit strange, one seems to forget that the Lisbon Treaty from 2007 in Article 72 clearly states that everything that has to do with national security stays within the competence of the national authorities. So 2007, 2016, it's 9 years, have things fundamentally changed since then. I'm a lawyer, pacta sunt servanda, so I think one has to reflect on that. Secondly, the idea of a European CIA or FBI induces the thought that there is actually no collaboration at all. Well, let me say that we, and I use now the we, the intelligence services, we did not wait for someone in the European institutions to come out with a brilliant idea of a European CIA or FBI to start collaboration. The intelligence services collaborate on many levels, bilateral level, multilateral level, and it is the key of collaboration between intelligence services. A European CIA or FBI will, in my opinion, not work, and I've been there long enough to assure you that no intelligence service, and certainly not the ones of big countries, will be wanting to discuss in a forum with 28 countries information that is operational, that is highly sensitive, and that could endanger, for instance, human sources. And I think that immediately after that this idea was launched, you heard several politicians from Great Britain, from France, from Germany, saying that the idea of a European CIA or FBI was not at the agenda. Now, and I will practically close with that, take the real CIA, the American CIA, well, they weren't able to foil the terrorist attacks on their soil in 2001. So what we need is more investigation in security service, a policy on the level of the political authorities that is in the mid and the long term. What we need is that finally the PNR should be agreed on. Just before I came here, I saw that the Parliament today took the step. There is another step now to take. What we need is to find people who can monitor the internet and who can after that, because monitoring the internet is one issue, but when you have all the information coming out from your monitoring, you need people to analyze it, because if you don't analyze a mass of information, you end up with too much information, and too much information kills information. What will the future bring? Well, I already told you that I think we'll have to live, and for a rather long period, with an imminent threat of other terrorist attacks, also, I think, in Belgium. The message recently sent out by ES in their propaganda paper Dabik is very clear. Paris was a warning, Brussels was a reminder, and the worst is still to come. It seems also clear to me that while IS seems to be losing on the military terrain, they will try to prove that nevertheless they are still able to do something disruptive by organizing a terrorist attack in a European country. And what intelligence services all over the world now fear is that we could be facing simultaneous attacks in different locations, different cities, or even different countries on the same moment. And then the question is, and I come again to what I said before, how are the Western democracies going to react? What are we willing to give up in the fight against terrorism? Are we going to change our way of life? I should say no, because if you change your way of life, the terrorists have already won. Are we going to change our democratic values, freedom of speech, etc., etc.? I don't think it's a good idea, because then you go indeed in what those terrorist movements are wanting to happen. What we need is, for instance, border controls at the external borders of the European Union. And when I mean border controls, I'm not speaking only of refugees. I'm speaking also of terrorists and candidate terrorists. So in the end, I think that the terrorist movement will be defeated. All terrorist movements finally end up defeated. But it will be, I think, a very long and difficult struggle, and one in which, to quote Churchill, there is nothing else for the moment to offer than tears, sweat and blood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winants, for your comprehensive and realistic take on the magnitude of the challenges we are facing. I will not recall the many points you highlighted just for a reason of time, but I trust that some of your remarks will be picked up by the questions in the following phase by the public. I will now move to Senator Destex, member of the Belgian Parliament and former Secretary General of Médecins Sans Frontières, among other things. Senator, I think the challenge for a policymaker and a politician like yourself in these current times is certainly very high and very demanding. I would say maybe in a couple of words, it's also about working on the long-term prevention of radicalization within societies. It's about securing citizens and making sure that you have effective security in place, but it's also indeed about integrating all the layers of societies. And I think we've heard interesting voices on the societal factors which needs to be tackled. So if I may ask for your thoughts on how a comprehensive and integrated political response can be made to counter at least some of these emerging challenges, and I admit it's not an easy question.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My task is very difficult because I'm the last speaker. I guess some of you are already exhausted. And in particular, it's even more difficult because none of them did respect the 15-minute time allocated. So I try not to do the same because we would be over 5 o'clock if I do that. So let me first of all say, as many before me said, we were not surprised. Belgium was involved since at least 2001 in several terrorist attacks or problems. You mentioned Muriel de Kock, the first Belgian terrorist to blow herself in Iraq, the first Westerner to commit a suicide attack in Iraq. We can go even further back to Commandant Massoud, the killer of Commandant Massoud in Afghanistan, hold a Belgian passport, and all over the time, whether in the Madrid attack or in the Thalys, in the Paris killing in Verviers, you find some Belgian connection in all this aspect. So what I'm going to try to do is to try to give you in a few minutes what went wrong in Belgium and why Belgium is more involved than ever is this phenomenon of radicalism and terrorism. Of course, it is a worldwide and European phenomena, but yes, we have to acknowledge that Belgium is more concerned than others. And I would like to give a few points on the roots of this problem. Well, first of all, I believe that excessive immigration in Belgium combined with a lack of of integration is part of the problem. Since the year 2000, Belgium has had a relatively open policy in terms of immigration to welcome refugees, migrants, family reunification. And, very few people knows that. But if you compare in relation with the population, Belgium has accepted more people than all its neighbors except Luxembourg, and is more immigration country than Canada, United States, of Australia. Well, if I ask you what are traditional immigration countries, you would say Australia, Canada, and America. But you wouldn't probably say Belgium. But yes, since 2000, it has been the case. Now, the problem is not immigration as such, is that besides immigration, there were, in most part of Belgium, zero policy of integration. Okay, Flanders started a program about 10 or 15 years ago, but nothing in Brussels and in Wallonia. Absolutely nothing. Was not compulsory or not even proposed to learn languages, the Belgian languages. Discussion about values, custom, tradition, history. No, the philosophy was that foreigners were supposed to integrate by themselves. I don't know how, but without any active policy of integration. Now, this is, of course, contrary to what happened in Canada or in the United States. Well, the consequences of this situation has been the creation of Molenbeek-like, of ghettos, ghettos where community live among themselves. We call that in French communautarism. And this has been this communautarism that you can see not only in Molenbeek, you can see that in Schaerbeek, in Anderlecht, in many other municipalities in Brussels or elsewhere, has been aggravated by the political system of Belgium of clientelism and patronage. Politicians in Belgium, it's not the case in all the countries in the world, but are still able, to give jobs in the civil service, in administration, to give subsidies, to give state money to different groups. And you have had a system of patronage and clientelism, which has in fact encouraged communautarism and the ghetto system. So now we face this problem that in Brussels is a city. You might not realize that in audience like this, but where 30% of the population is Muslim, And some people say it might be 50% in the coming 20 years. And you see how segregated it is. If you go in European circle, if you go in business circle, you know, in Brussels, you don't see that at all. People are really living in different groups, in different neighborhoods, in different communes, and don't speak to each other in general. In fact, let me give you a few examples of this. The Turks, the Belgian Turks, because I forget to say that we had also a very liberal, I'm a liberal politician, or laxist policy in terms of citizenship. All those people are Belgian citizens, whether of Moroccan or Turkish origin. And during more than 10 years, the Belgian nationality was given almost without any condition. You just, maybe some of you benefited. You needed to be a resident for 3 years. After 7 years, it was absolutely automatic, but after 3 years, you can apply for citizenship. 2 years if you were recognized refugees, and then you didn't get any particular condition except residency. You didn't need any economic condition. You didn't need to sustain yourself. It was not a condition. You didn't need to say that you will speak a national language of Belgium, or to demonstrate that you speak one language, or to demonstrate, for example, that you are not going to be in favor of applying Sharia in Belgium. No, you could become a Belgian citizen. So if there were several studies of this, so the Belgian Turks, or the Turks Belgium, call them as you want, when there is an election I guess most of you would admit with me that Erdogan is not the best democrat that we can imagine, and that he has both authoritarian and Islamistic tendency. But the Belgian Turk, when they can vote in Belgium and in election in Turkey, they vote always more for Erdogan than the Turks in Turkey, 10 or 15% more. So in the Belgian Turk community, Erdogan has a lot of support. If you see surveys like do Turks or Moroccan married among themselves, or do you have mixed marriage? Very few. If you do surveys like what do you think about homosexuality or things like that, you still have big rejection of acceptance of homosexuality. So you have many indicators which show that in fact integration failed. So you have a kind of continuum. Of course, you have this uncontrolled immigration with no condition of integration, which creates the ghetto system of communautarism. This system being himself the roots and the origin for some, of course not all, of extremism, radicalization, and finally terrorism. My neighbor mentioned the question of Islam. Yes, of course, it is a minority, even if it's an active minority. But the problem is deeper than radicalism and violent terrorism. In Brussels, you can find all the trends of Islam, from the most moderate to the most extremist. And probably because of this open policy of immigration, and because of the presence of the European institution, all important Islamic ideology in the Muslim world has established a presence in Brussels. And the danger is not only the violent extremists. You have also many groups of fundamentalism, Wahhabite style Islamists, who are not violent and who will never become violent, but who advocate a kind of society based on Sharia. This is also a problem. There is widespread anti-Semitism in Brussels, widespread anti-Semitism. The Belgian papers, they don't like to speak about that, but it's a reality. In all those neighborhoods that I call the ghetto neighborhood, in Molenbeek, Anderlecht, and others, well, teaching the Holocaust is compulsory in secondary school. At the end of secondary, it's not teach anymore, because if the teacher tries to do it, he faces riots in the class. So hypocritically, we have decided, okay, we hide the fact that this part of the curriculum is not teach anymore. many girls or women, they don't go at all to the sport classes, which are also compulsory. So, as you rightly said before, we have allowed to create parallel society within our society. You know, some people in the city, they are Belgian, they have the same rights as all over Belgium and European, but they don't share anymore the same values as ours. And personally, I think because, you know, people don't like to speak too much about this problem, but I think the question is really present of the compatibility of Islam with Western value in Brussels. Of course, most and many and the majority of Muslims can live perfectly within a democratic society. But you have three major problems which I think we will have to address in the future. First of all, the question of, are you allowed to change religion? Are you allowed to change religion? For many Muslims in Brussels, discuss with them, a minority again, but still, you know, when you have 30% of Muslims, if you have a minority of 10 or 15%, it's a huge number of people. The Quran condemned the change of religion. It's a crime of apostasy. Well, we should have this discussion. No, if you are part of a Western liberal society, you are allowed to change religion. Second point, the equality between men and women, a major issue in many neighborhoods in Brussels. And lastly, of course, this question of anti-Semitism. Well, I will not speak very much about the system of mosque recognition and so on, but also we have a huge problem in Belgium. You know, the Constitution of Belgium says that you're free to practice your religion, so that means every mosque, every imam could be welcome in Belgium, and we don't have the legal tools right now to fight some of the radical and hate speech. So the first point was immigration and lack of political integration. The second was the question of Islamism. Of course, I'm not an expert of security, but I just would like quickly to react to some of the point I have heard before. Well, the second guy, he didn't blow up himself, but the second guy who made the killing in Malbec, station underground Malbec, Osama Krayem, well, he came as a refugee through Leros in Turkey. He was registered by Frontex, but not identified by Europol. Why? And I would have liked to ask the question to the guy from the EC. The database of Frontex and Europol are not yet interconnected. Come on. Okay? So you could be registered by Frontex, but not be identified in the database of Europol. Well, secondly, I also believe that with the limited means, the state security of Belgium has done a tremendous job. But yes, it's true. They were very much under scrutiny of some politicians. And the famous mayor of Molenbeek, not the one now, the one before, Philippe Moreau, I think now you start to know him. No later than 3 years ago, in 2013, he gave an interview to the newspaper Le Soir, saying, no, we don't need state security anymore. We have to demonstrate this agency, and the justice system can do the job. Well, he has explained the difference between the role of the judiciary and the long-term and medium-term approach. But so, only 3 years ago, some very key, he's not anybody, you know, he's the vice chairman of the Socialist Party, he was the vice chairman of the Socialist Party nationally at the time, and the head of the social, so it's not a
ex-minister of Justice.
Yeah, so it's not a medium-sized politician like me. He's a, you know, very high-level politician. He wanted to disband the state security. So can you imagine the difficulty for the state security to work in this condition? Now, you know, I also, maybe there are some parliamentary assistants here in the group, but I remember very well in December, or not in December, before the Paris attack, I remember some MEPs or some of the assistants being bothered by military control at the entrance of the military parliament. And some people say, oh, this is just show, this is exaggerated. Well, it was not show, it was really important to be there. So this is just on security. Two more points and then I will close. Well, this is more to open the discussion than something else. But I just disagree with the speech which say, oh, the problem is economical integration, and these people are poor, not integrated of society, and if they were integrated, it would not happen. Well, Abdeslam. Well, first of all, if you see their background, most of them, they don't come from poor community. They come from middle-income families or even high-income family, like Osama and bin Laden. Bin Laden was not a poor, he was a terrorist, but he was not particularly poor. But even Abdeslam, you know, so well-known Abdeslam, come on, this guy, he was working for the STIB. You all know the STIB, the public transport company. When you work for the STIB, it's a lifelong employment, no way to get fired. Except if you kill somebody or become drunk. Well, he got fired because he never came. So, come on, is he a victim of society? He got a good job, correctly paid, more than average of the market. So describing terrorists as poor guy, it's not true. And even if it's the case for some of them, I mean, come on. In Brussels only, there are 100,000 unemployed people. 100,000 unemployed people. I mean, they don't become terrorists. It's not because you have hardship in life that you become a terrorist. So I don't believe in the economic explanation. But yes, I do believe in the criminal explanation to some extent, and it will be my last point. You know, if you see all of them as a criminal past, they all got ridiculous sentence. And even when the sentence were ridiculous, they were even reduced later. I won't go into detail, but it's unbelievable. I mean, the brave al-Baghrati, you know, and that I don't know who is to blame, if it is the judge, the prosecutor, or the politician, probably both. But when there was the trial of Sharia for Belgium, and basically I really agree with both of you said on Sharia for Belgium, it took 2.5 years before we decided that we are going to prohibit Sharia for Belgium. 2.5 years, that's very long, you know? And yes, at the beginning, some people treated them like clowns. Oh, you know, they put Belgium flag on the Atonium with us. And they were not taken seriously, far too long. But then we had last week this Migue trial in Antwerp, in Anvers, 46 prévenus, how do you say that, in defendant? 46. And the leaders, they were facing a long sentence, but to be only a member of this group, the sentence you face were maximum 3 to 5 years. Absolutely, come on. Is that enough if you belong to a terrorist group that you could be sentenced to a maximum of 5 years, which in Belgium means 1.5 years in jail, huh? Because after a third of your sentence, you could be free. So, you know, I wrote an article in Le Figaro this week about that. I think if we continue with the system of thinking that those people could be rehabilitated and reintegrated in society, we're going to fail because we're going to free future terrorism. By the way, in Belgium, the rate of recidive is 6 out of 10. Okay, so 6 out of 10 people who go to jail, they recidive within the next 8 years, and the biggest rate of recidive is for thief with violence. So if you are a thief with violence, you have a very, very high risk of violence. So maybe it's better to think about keeping these people in jail instead of releasing them. And yes, if we continue with this system of, you know, not keeping these people enough time in jail, the justice system will become accomplices of those terrorists and those criminals. So, of course, and to end, yes, there is no easy solution because we have put ourselves in a situation where there is no easy solution to get out. There is no easy solution for anybody, you know, in France, in the UK, wherever it is. But for the reason I have time to explain, it's even more complex here. For example, the guy of the EC, he said, well, those who didn't commit crimes in Syria should be reintegrated. Is it that sure? I mean, the simple fact that you joined the Islamic State, even if you don't fight yourself, you are part of it. I mean, you support it by your work, by your presence, by your political work. So personally, I think everybody coming back from Syria should go first to jail. And after you can discuss what you do with them. But it's very dangerous to just make the difference between those who have blood on their hand and those who didn't supposed to have blood on their hand. You know, in Auschwitz, many people didn't kill directly, but they were part of Auschwitz. So here it's the same. It's the same situation. And yes, I also fully agree. We didn't treat the phenomenon of Syrian fighters seriously at the beginning. For example, there was a woman who became pregnant from a jihadist, and our Minister of Home Affairs, the one who just resigned 2 days ago, she helped to expatriate the pregnant woman from Syria to a good hospital of Belgium, because it was very important that this woman terrorist could give birth in very good condition in Belgium hospital. You know, so this is how we treated the problem at the beginning. So I would like to end by a sentence of Peter Drucker, the famous guru manager. Somebody put this sentence on my Facebook. Please join me on Facebook. I'm a politician after all. The greatest danger in terms of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday logic. Think of it. Thank you.
There was a comment made by the senator on database management, and I would invite indeed the Commission representative to maybe respond on that and also to take some questions from the audience. I would ask you to kindly introduce yourself and be quite telegraphic in your question. I would take 4 to 5 questions, and then we see if we manage to have maybe another quick round. 2, 3. Okay. Okay. There is one question here to start with. Please.
Julian Barnes, Wall Street Journal. Absolutely. Julian Barnes, Wall Street Journal. You talked about intelligence sharing. I'm curious if on a bilateral basis, Belgium is getting what it needs from other countries in order to confront the problem, or do the big countries keep their information among themselves with people who have equal resources to them?
Should be another question here. Yes, please, gentlemen.
Julian Hale, I'm a freelance journalist. I had a couple of questions. One for the Commission, representative who mentioned about radicalisation. I just wondered if you could give some sort of practical example. You know, he spoke about empowering frontline actors, teachers, etc., etc. Just how, you know, how practically is that going to be done? How are they going to be explained to how to identify someone who's radicalised, and then what happens when they do know that somebody's radicalised? What's the next chain? Because that's all crucial, it seems to me, to know practically what these people have to do. And the other question is on Belgian integration, which is not happening, we hear. I mean, could you enlighten us on what is happening, what is planned by the Belgian authorities, either in Flanders, Wallonia or Brussels, and also what should, in addition, perhaps, in your opinion, be added to that?
Thank you very much. I think we have another 2 or 3 questions. One from gentleman there.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Huang Zeyu, an intern from the Macau Economic Trade Office to the EU. I lived in Beijing for 4 years when I was still undergraduate. Every metro and railway station has a security checkpoint equipped with the scanning machines. So I'm wondering, after the terrible Paris and Brussels attacks, is it possible for European Union countries to set up similar checkpoints equipped with high-tech devices to, rather than merely military soldiers. This question is for the representative. The other question is for the Mr. Winans. It's about the anti-terrorism legislation and strategy. So China has passed the anti-terrorism law last year. So many Western countries criticize the legislation is controversial because it requires technology firms to decrypt the information, like what the FBI did to the Apple in the dispute. So I want to ask you to clarify on how to strike a balance between anti-terrorism and the restrictions on civil liberties, like the fundamental freedom to privacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. More questions from the audience?
Thank you. Karl Marzocchi, council official, but of course on a personal capacity. To Peter van Ostaaien and possibly to Mr. Winans, the claim that ISIS is exploiting refugee flows to infiltrate operatives. We have very little evidence of that, actually, a couple of anecdotes. Do you believe that there can be an explicit strategy to do that? Or is it more or less a case happening?
Thank you. I think I've seen more questions. One there. I think there was one behind.
Kevin Wouters from the Belgian Press Agency. Question for Mr. Winans. You seem to put a lot of responsibility with the Rupo government by not taking Sharia for Belgium and the other extremists serious. Did I understand that correctly, that they have a big responsibility in that?
One more question before I revert to the panel.
Ronnie, I'm the journalist from Middle East Diplomatic. My first question will be to the Commission representative. Your colleague was speaking about that they have cooperation with Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, and so on. Do they have also cooperation with the Kurdish the government and the Kurdish security services? Because they are on the ground, they are fighting. The second question was to maybe Mr. Alan Vivant about things. These those people, when they start to go from Europe to going to the Syria. Of course, the Syria was very intriguing them to that. Do the European security services was cooperating with the Turkish authority, and what was the response from the Turkish authority to the European, for example?
Thank you very much. I propose that each speaker maybe touches upon the points he's been asked to address, and of course, if you wish to add more remarks or points, we can have a whole round and then conclude. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Javier Castillejos from DG Home Affairs. I would like to mention, to touch upon a few issues that were mentioned in the previous presentations, where the speakers, some of the previous speakers talk about it, mainly on the exchange of information and radicalization. I mean, on exchange of information, there's one extreme, which is whether there are some problems between the exchange of information of agencies, and going to the other extreme, which is this call from several politicians at national level or in the European Parliament about a so-called European CIA or European FBI. On the specific case of Frontex and Europol, I'm glad to tell you that in March it was concluded the agreement so that they can exchange the information between the two agencies. So as you see, there's a response and continuous work in many fronts. And I would say that the exchange of information between law enforcement agencies, border authorities, between member states is one of the key issues, together with the operational cooperation. The exchange of information is the key issue to ensure that the threat that we are facing at the moment, which is obviously a transnational threat. We've talked a lot about Belgium today, but it's obvious that in these attacks in Paris and so on, there are connections to many countries in Europe. So we are not talking about the Belgian problem. Whenever we see a terror attack in Europe, it's an attack on all Europeans. So in this sense, there is a lot of work being done by the Commission in terms of supporting the exchange of information between member states. As it was mentioned today, it was approved the PNR, which will be a very useful tool to have access, for example, to data of information on foreign terrorist fighters coming back to Europe by airplane, for example. There is lots, almost 20 information systems for border security, for internal security, exchange of information of criminal records at the borders, on visas, on fingerprints, on many other elements that are needed for us to track terrorists traveling throughout Europe to commit their terrorist attacks. So in that sense, we are aware of the difficulties to exchange information, and we are working very hard to improve it in the coming months and years. On another aspect that was mentioned as well, on the criminalization of foreign terrorist fighters coming back to Europe from Syria and Iraq. The Commission proposed on the 2nd of December a directive on combating the terrorism, which has proposed a large number of provisions on the criminalization of terrorist offenses, not only committing terrorist acts themselves, but also the participation in terrorist organization, the travel abroad to participate in a terrorist organization, but also travel within the European Union and helping, supporting through finance, for example, through recruitment, terrorist organizations. So I would say that this was a very solid proposal, very broad, covering, tackling the need for a strong judicial response and criminal response to terrorism. So anyone supporting financially or logistically a terrorist organization, how to ensure that this is punished in every member state. Another aspect that was also mentioned was radicalization, and there were some comments on the specific Belgian situation. And here I will try to answer your question, but I'm not the one dealing with the Radicalization Awareness Network. I'm working more on terrorism financing. But I would say on radicalization, we have to deal with in a case-by-case basis. I mean, every person who is radicalized will have a different background, a different reason, a trigger for being radicalized. And it's obvious that in many cases we see the economic situation, the unemployment, the lack of integration, obviously, as one of the as the background of most of the people who are radicalized in Europe. But there's always a trigger which can come from a personal situation, from an external event, and it's obvious that the ISIS and the call that ISIS have made to Muslims around the world to support their cause, that has been a strong trigger for people to being radicalized. And I would like also to mention, just to complement a bit what was said before, the fact that we see with the internet the acceleration of the radicalization processes. It's not a matter of years or months. We are talking sometimes about people who in many cases do not have a strong relationship with Islam. They are not they don't practice Islam very strongly, or they are not very active people in mosques and so on, but who get radicalized and in a very fast way. That's what we are looking at the moment. And it's, as I said, not always people who you would call it a traditional Muslim practicant. On that sense, as I said, I cannot give you concrete examples, but the work that is being done in the Radicalization Awareness Network is basically bringing practitioners together from all fields, and we are talking prisons, social workers, health workers. So I would say we need a multi-agency approach. Again, for every case, if we are talking about someone who is in prison and who is being radicalized, we need the prisons officials, social workers, so more than one stakeholder or authorities around it to tackle this specific case. And that's so the exchange of practices. And I would say that there are also very good examples in cities in Belgium, for example, on addressing the radicalization processes. So the key aspect, radicalization, it's tackling it. It will be a local action that needs to be put in place, but the exchange of practices across Europe can help to give those practitioners the tools, the training, all the elements to, for example, to identify the person who is being radicalized. It's obvious that, for example, law enforcement authorities could give these tools and criteria to know whether one person is being radicalized to people like social workers who might not know so much about the topic. So I think that were the questions that were put to me. I don't think there was anything else, but if I forgot something. Yes, sorry. Yes, sorry. On that one, here, I guess you're talking more about intelligence cooperation or cooperation at military level. And here, the European Union is response to terrorism threat is both internally, in terms of increasing the internal security, and external in the sense of supporting countries in, for example, Jordan and Lebanon, to track financially the movement of funds from ISIL, or to track the access or the smuggling of cultural goods from Iraq and Syria to other countries. So let's say that's the kind of support we are giving to other countries. Of course, the European Union has no competence in terms of intelligence or military action as such, so we are not providing this kind of support. I'm not the person from the External Action Service who could maybe reply better to your question. I'm working more on internal security, but as I say, the type of cooperation we do is through governments and at the level of support to the authorities in financial issues, in counterfeiting or counter-smuggling, but the European Union as such is not has no military cooperation in that sense, as far as I am aware. So,
no support, no intelligent cooperation. There is no with Kurds.
I'm not. As I say, there might be more the countries, some member states who are involved in the anti-ISIL coalition. I cannot tell exactly what kind of support they can give to the Kurds, but it's obviously not the Commission.
Thank you
Yes.
very much. Mr. von Steyen, would you like to comment on some of the points?
Basically, at first, the question about the refugees. Yes, the Islamic State has been using these routes to get people back into Europe. But in my idea, they haven't institutionalized it yet. So occasionally they send people over, but it's not like we're facing a big stampede of these guys coming back home. Although it has been said that it is believed, and it is said, rumored, that Abaoud said that at least 50 other people came back to Europe when he entered Europe again. So that could point to indeed the fact that there would be a still consisting threat, not only here in Belgium, but in the entirety of the European Union. Then I would like to say briefly something about the information exchange. I've noticed a few things. As I noticed, as I said before, I've been keeping my database since December 2012. Quite recently, after the attacks in Paris, the Belgian government started talking about building up a database of foreign fighters. I'm quite worried that they don't have it yet. And if they do have it, I do hope that they have the amount of information that I have. That would lead me to another important thing, the information. Where does it come from? Does it need to come from international or national cooperation between security services and police forces? Not necessarily. I think a lot of the information is available freely out there on the internet, just by using Twitter and following the right guys. Just if anybody speaks Arabic, just follow some of the guys I'm following on Twitter. You'll be amazed at what I'm finding daily. So that would be scanning the internet, scanning social media. That can contribute to a lot of the knowledge about these groups and a lot of knowledge about foreign fighters leaving. And then there is, of course, the element, and Mr. Wienand has touched this point, the element of human intelligence, that you need people on the ground. You need people here in the quarters in Brussels who can infiltrate in a way in the Muslim communities, who can, they would feel, they would notice what is going on inside the communities. If some guys are radicalizing, that's where you have to be. That's where you really will be able to stop them even. Which would lead me to one concluding note. As for a few months ago, even that was also said after the Paris attacks by, if I'm not mistaken, our Minister of Interior, Jan Jambon, when he said that the Belgian Federal Police at this time has one person working, scanning the social media half time. I think I'm even doing a better job than that. And those things kind of worry me in a way. And I do believe that, I do hope actually that our government right now will indeed invest more in the security services, but not only in the security services, but also in some kind of a framework that can put people, even if they're not affiliated with security services, that can engage people to cooperate with them in a way. I believe I could have contributed in a lot of ways. For example, if I would only have known a week before the Bardo Museum attacks in Tunis, I received a message, private message from an ISIS jihadi, and he told me next week there is going to be glorious news coming out from Tunis. I had no idea how to interpret that. Would I have had a network behind me which I could consult? Maybe they could have stopped this. Hasn't happened yet anytime since, but it's worrying that you as an individual get warned a week in advance that something is coming up in Tunisia. So I do hope that Belgian government and security services can learn some lessons from what has been going wrong in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wienand, would you like to respond to some of the questions?
Yes, well, the first question, does the intelligence services in Belgium receive all the information it needs? I think the answer would be yes. The advantage of being the capital of Europe is that you have all the representatives of the big services who are here in Belgium, and if there is one issue, I think, on which security services are aware of the need of close cooperation, it would be terrorism. So I think that I can say that given what has happened in other countries, and certainly after the London, Madrid, Casablanca, Paris and Brussels attacks, I think that we can be rather sure that we receive the information from our partners, and we have the forums, the reunions in which we can exchange that information. The second question, if I understood it, was the field of tension between anti-terrorism legislation and civil liberties. Well, that's the general problem always of intelligence services. Intelligence services and the work intelligence services do is, of course, something that goes into and against privacy of people. And that's why in my expose I asked how far are we willing to go, what are we willing to give up as civil liberties, as privacy, in the fight against terrorism. Belgium has an anti-terrorist legislation, and with what has happened, it is trying to broaden it until, I don't know even if the law has changed, but until a few years ago, there was no legal possibility to punish someone who went to Syria, for instance. You could only do it if you could prove that that person went there with terrorist aims and that he was implicated in terrorist behavior. The government has now, I think it must have been passed a few weeks ago, have now put on new legislation in which the mere fact of going and participating in a combat zone is in se already enough to be imprisoned. Now, on the refugees routes, I'm not going to dwell on that subject. I think that we have two cases we know of. I don't think that this is an institutional way for IS to bring would-be terrorists here to Belgium. I think that IS has other means to transport their jihadi fighters to here, and I don't think that a would-be terrorist would take the risk to go on a rubber boat and to make the trip from Lesbos or I don't know where. So I think they have other means, but it's certain, and I think two cases at least have been proven, that they use the refugee route to try to infiltrate people here into Belgium. What the Turkish authorities, well, we have a very good contact with the Turkish authorities. I have, when I was at the head of the service, met the head of the Turkish service at several occasions. Of course, you have the internal problem in Turkey that, and with what you already said, you have Kurds fighting on the ground, but you have the PKK that is seen by the Turkish as at least, I would not say as dangerous, but also a danger for the Turkish people. So we have, of course, with the Turkish authorities, we have exchange of information in both ways. So my answer would be yes.
Yeah, but why you could not, you know, if they sent you all the information, why you could not do as prevalent all the actions in Europe? Because they are keeping the main information the way.
Well, as I told you, I'm out of the service since 2 years. I don't know if they are keeping information. The information that Erdogan says he has given to the Netherlands and that has been sent to Belgium also, for one or another reason, it didn't reach the right canals, but apparently the information was given. So that's all that I can tell you. Now the last question. I don't target particularly the Di Rupo government. I was saying that when we attracted the attention on the Sharia for Belgium movement, at that time, it was the government of Mr. Di Rupo that was in place and that was responsible. But to be very clear, and I've said that at many occasions, in fact, I target all the governments before that also, because one of the big problems in Belgium is that there is an enormous lack of intelligence culture on the level of politicians. Intelligence and security was not something in which politicians were interested. It was not something that was popular to gain voices. Now, of course, we see a different situation. I think that I could count on the fingers of one hand the politicians that knew exactly what a security service was standing for and what it was doing. And so I certainly don't tackle a special government. What I have denounced is that there was, and still is, but we are on a road of recuperation now, but there was an immense lack of intelligence culture in Belgium. And to put it with a formula I several times used, James Bond could never be a Belgian.
Thank you very much, sir, also for this humoristic final remark. Senator, up to you for the final comments.
Yes, I don't know what I should think about your latest remark. Okay, well, just on the refugee issue, well, I agree with both previous speakers, but still, we had two. One in Paris, one in Brussels, who were, who killed many people. It's only two, but they killed in Paris and they killed in Brussels. The policy in Belgium, yes, probably in the near future, all regional Belgian government will have a policy of integration, but only for newcomers, not for those who are already here and are not yet integrated. But the difficulty, and I think this brings an important question for the future of the Belgian state, is that if you want to fight properly terrorism, you need to have a comprehensive strategy, not only in terms of justice and security, which is at federal level in Belgium, but also for religious affairs, for integration, and for education at least. And those competencies in Belgium are spread over all governments. Religious affairs is mainly region, a little bit federal government. Integration is regional. Education is not even regional, it's what we call communities. So it's extremely complex. We have been very far with the devolution of power, and it was not always there was a price to pay for this devolution in terms of efficacy. We have this stupid system of having 6 police zones in Brussels. So Brussels is not even like in New York, London, or Paris, one police area. There are 6 different police areas with 6 boss, 6 websites. Try to put Brussels police on the website. You will arrive on the police of the municipality of Brussels, not on the whole region. And so I think every Belgian politician should make an effort to try to have a coherent state in the future. The mayors of Brussels should accept that they have to lose some power on the police. But also the Flemish Belgian nationalists, they should accept that some things should be carried out at national level. An effective police system, for example, in Belgium, you cannot have the airport belonging to one police in particular, and the capital belonging to 6 other different police. So I really hope that would be, as Charles Michel said, that 22 of March will be a new beginning, and that would be before and an after the 22nd of March, and that some subjects which are really taboo in Belgium would be finally addressed. After all, we have to remember that we needed to have the Dutroux, you all remember Marc Dutroux's story, in order to move from 19 police areas in Brussels to 6. Well, now maybe hopefully we'll go from 6 to 1. Let's see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think the event now is coming to an end. First of all, I would like to apologize if we ran a bit over time, but I think it was worth taking a bit of your time to listen to the contributions by our excellent speakers. I think we plunged today into a deep sea of interrelated challenges which stem from the terrorist threats, but also underpin it in many respects. Certainly today we could hear interesting thoughts on avenues of cooperation, solutions, tools that can be deployed in order to provide a a more effective, a stronger response at different levels. It is certainly not the end of the story, just the beginning, and the same applies also to our joint project, so I hope you enjoy this first event. More events will be coming, and as Roberta was explaining, we'll come up also with the final publication. So please stay tuned. Thank you very much for coming, for taking time to be with us. Thank you very much also to our excellent speakers, and I hope you will join me in a big applause for their contribution. Thank you so much.